begin first and foremost here by dealing with what is a presupposition. What's a worldview? I've been using these terms, ad nauseum. A presupposition, okay, insofar as this is concerned in this context, what I mean by that is our most basic and fundamental beliefs. Presuppositions determine what we will accept as evidence, as well as how we will interpret that evidence. Okay, so these are awfully important. It is at this level that we evaluate those arguments that we give one another. A worldview is another word I've been talking about over and over and over. And a worldview is simple. You've got presuppositions, okay? These are the most foundational things by which we evaluate evidences, and we evaluate what we see and our ideas about man and all that. A worldview is simply networking those things together into a comprehensive unit. That's all that is. Okay, that's why it's a worldview. It encompasses what you believe about man, what you believe about reality, and it is through this lens that you evaluate everything. That's why it's called presuppositions. Okay, you presuppose these things before you even look at the evidence. Okay, that's how we interpret those things. We can't just look at facts without understanding that we have an interpretation of facts. Everything that you bring to the table, everything that an atheist brings, is an interpreted fact, or it's an interpreted piece of evidence. And they are saying, well, according to my interpretation, I believe this is a fact. So presuppositions are those things, is the interpretational grid. Two things need to be said. One, we can't just say that it's axiomatic. We can't just say, oh, well, these are our presuppositions, and I just assume them, and I don't have to prove them. That is begging the question. Okay, and this is extraordinarily problematic when the espoused presuppositions that you hold to would make impossible the very things you're trying to do. For example, if your espoused presuppositions can't account for the possibility of evidence or the possibility of knowledge, then for you to want to bring evidence and knowledge to the table is problematic at best. You can't hold presuppositions that militate against the very thing you're using without trying to explain or justify your presuppositions and show how these things are consistent. Otherwise, what we've got is someone who's completely arbitrary. We've got someone that it feels very, very comfortable begging the question. And this is intellectual suicide. There are three areas that I want to deal with. One is the one and the many, and this is an issue that not many people are aware of, and especially the importance of it. The other one is the uniformity of nature, and lastly will be inductive reasoning. And then after all of that, I'll deal real quickly with the issue of miracles. Somebody brought up miracles, and it's definitely an important question, a good question at that. And all through the history of man, people have tried to figure out how we're able to have generalizations and yet also have particulars. Okay, are we going to, is everything one, or is everything radically different? Are we one united thing, or are we completely diverse? And it's my position that the Christian worldview and it alone can account for this through the concrete universal that we know as the Trinity, or the ontological Trinity. And trying to find the balance between the one and the many has been something that's been frustrating to every single philosopher all through mankind. And it's my position that the Christian worldview and it alone can account for this through the concrete universal that we know as the Trinity, or the ontological Trinity. The ontological Trinity, what that does is you have the one and the many. You have the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You have the diversity, and yet they are one God at the exact same time. The three are equally ultimate. Okay, the oneness and the diversity are equally ultimate, and this is key. There are no particulars that aren't related to the universal, and there are no universals that aren't related to the particulars. Now, someone can ask and say, well, okay, we'll grant that you believe in a Trinity, but what does that have to do with the temporal order? Because we have a Creator who's both one and many at the same time, equally ultimate in both. Okay, and He's created the world in such a fashion that it, to some degree, albeit not perfect, but to some degree, it reflects and exemplifies His nature. If we say that nature will exemplify the metaphysical, okay, what's beyond this, if we say that, and if we believe that what's beyond this and what's in the heavenly is one, 1 and 3, 3 and 1, we would have no problem with the one and the many here, because we have the concrete universal by which these make sense. This is absolutely central to knowledge because it's at this level where we are able to generalize and where we are able to look at something as particular. The second piece is induction. Induction, for our sake here, will be the method of generalizing from observed cases to all cases of the same kind. David Hume would have argued that each and every premise, every bit of reasoning about any single event or situation at a particular time in a particular place would need to be individually confirmed empirically. According to Hume, there is no way that that person would be able to go and say, well, okay, I'm going to put my hand in fire here, and then I'm going to go to the future and do the exact same thing over here, and you'd have to individually verify it. Now, he understood that people use induction. His question, what he wanted to know, is what are the foundations of this? He said, yeah, we take this for granted, but he wanted to know on what foundation, on what basis do you do that? And that's been my question all along. Bertrand Russell, he had this to say. He said, all arguments which on the basis of experience argue as to the future or the unexperienced parts of the past or present assume the inductive principle. Hence, we can never use experience to prove the inductive principle without begging the question. Let me repeat that last sentence once again. Hence, we can never use experience to prove the inductive principle without begging the question. Well, why is that? Because when you say, well, because it's been that way in the past, you are presuming the inductive principle when doing that. Okay? You're presuming it the entire time, which begs the question. So you have to ask yourself, does your worldview account for such a thing? Does it? And Bertrand Russell's answer, of course, would be no. The question is then, how does the Christian worldview account for inductive reasoning? And it's pretty much the same as the uniformity of nature. So I'm gonna lump these two in together. So I'm dealing here not only with induction, but I'm dealing with the uniformity of nature, because they rely on one another. And it's this: is that we believe not only in a creator God, but that this creator God is one of sovereignty, and that he has providence over his created order. He didn't wind us up and let us go. He didn't throw us into a chaotic cosmos. He has placed us in an environment by which we are to live, to move, and to have our being. And he has placed us in an environment that is sustained with the necessary preconditions for life. And one of those necessary preconditions for life and for the purpose that he's placed us here is to have the world function in such a way that it is rather predictable. That I know that tomorrow, unless I die, or unless something radical happens, I'm going to wake up. That I know that when I put the keys in the car, that my keys aren't going to turn into a Gila monster. Okay, that if I am driving towards a semi-truck, like I mentioned before, if I'm driving towards a semi-truck, I have a good reason to believe that if I don't move out of the way, I'm going to be roadkill. Okay, so he's placed us in a world where we are able to rely on the basic trustworthiness of what we have around us. And the reason being is because God is a God of providence, he's a God of wisdom and of knowledge, and he's a God of order and design. Rhythm and rhyme. Okay, but how do you account for those weird interventions into the natural order and that we call miracles? You know, miracles only don't make sense if you believe that we live in a closed naturalistic system and that miracles or that omens and wonders have absolutely no rhythm and rhyme, and that there's no predictability whatsoever. Okay, that we can't distinguish between them, which we don't accept that. Okay, when push comes to shove, and all the evidence are on the table, and we're all looking at each other, and somebody sits there and they say, well, what is your proof? What is your proof? How do you prove the existence of God? Okay, or how can you prove me wrong? And the answer is really simple. Because the best argument for the existence of God, as I have demonstrated here, and as I've demonstrated in other places, is the impossibility of the contrary. Is that it is absolutely impossible for it to be contrary to the Christian worldview. Every single opposing worldview falls on its own claims. So to sum it up, the best argument for the existence of God is that without God's existence, you could not argue